Hello, my friends, and welcome to another breathing space. This moment where we pause our week together to breathe, take a moment for ourselves, and a moment to be a little bit closer with God. It's been a little while since we've seen each other. I hope you had a wonderful holiday, Christmas, and a happy New Year. I hope you were able to take some time to be with family and friends and enjoy yourself and maybe rest a little. And I hope that you were, of course, able to find a little time to be with God too. We find ourselves back with St. Francis this week, and I read from one of Thomas of Solano's texts, a biography on the stories of the second life of Francis, and I read from it. When one day he was riding on an ass, because weak and infirm as he was, he could not go by foot, he passed through the field of a peasant, who happened to be working there just then. The peasant ran over to him and asked solicitously if he were Brother Francis. When the man of God humbly replied that he was the man he was asking about, the peasant said, "Try to be as good as you are said to be by all men, for many put their trust in you. Therefore, I admonish you never to be other than you are expected to be." But when the man of God Francis heard this, he got down from the ass and threw himself before the peasant and humbly kissed his feet, thanking him for being kind enough to give him the admonition. And now coming from Micah. With what shall I come before the Lord and bow myself before God on high? Shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, with 10,000s of rivers of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? He has told you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you, but to do justice, and to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God? Well, my friends, interesting text. I find that story about St. Francis to almost be a little funny. Can you imagine that somebody of St. Francis's holiness, of his spiritual gifts, to be yelled at? I mean, there's no better word, by this peasant who clearly must have had some experience with leaders of faith or people who were of renown before at some point in life. But to think that this peasant stopped him and then wagged his finger at him and told him, "You better live up to what is being said about you." Why did Francis react the way that he did? Well, I think it comes down to humility, to recognizing that this peasant, this person who by all means in their society at the time was the lowest of the low, maybe not quite as low as the worthy poor or something like that, that this person who lived a very humble life could then in turn give a lesson to Francis, a reminder about living a humble life and to living up to people's expectations. It was a great reminder because it told Francis, too, that people were indeed looking up to him as a source of strength, a source of example for how to live their life. And it was really important for Francis to be able to hear those words. So when Francis heard them, so overjoyed was he for this reminder, so grateful that he fell to his knees, humbling himself even further. Of course, humility was a big part of Francis's life, to fall at the feet of this peasant, to kiss his feet and thank him. It falls in line, of course, with Jesus taught, but we find ourselves today in Micah with one of the prophets. And in there is one of the most famous lines, but that whole passage that I read from Micah is much about the same, right? The person asks, what does God need? Shall I give all these offerings to God? Shall I give my wealth, my esteems to show off before God how much I'm willing to worship God? And then what does God say in return? God turns and says, no, be kind, love justice, and walk humbly with me. It's a tremendous lesson, I think. This text that we've been reading through also quotes this morning, or this afternoon by the time you get this, from Henry Nouwen about how what Henry Nouwen calls this kind of humbling of one's life as downward mobility. And I absolutely love that expression, downward mobility. You know, in our Western culture, we're so into upward mobility, right? We want to improve our station in life. We want to be able to show those around us that we are successful, that we're doing well. But no, in the spiritual path that Christ calls us to, we are actually called to a life of downward mobility, and that we're called to continuously humble ourselves before others so that we can be receptive of their gifts, but also be receptive to the grace and love of God that we are so in need of being open to. That is what I want you to take into your session of meditation that we're going to jump into in just a few seconds here. Take this idea of downward mobility. How might your life look differently if you refocus from maybe how you've lived your life if you're now in retirement, or how you're currently living your life if you're working, in this idea of upward mobility, and shift it towards a more humble lifestyle, about not self-promoting, but rather putting others above yourself? How might your life look differently? How might the lives of others around you be different? How might your relationship with God improve? All right, I got to get out of this cold. Let's jump into our meditation. Here we go. Sit back.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.